go to question time 2.
Members, can I remind you that this meeting will be recorded and ask you to note that mobile phones should be switched off as they interfere with recording. Tablet devices should be switched to mute. Can I remind members to declare an interest as appropriate throughout the meeting? Can I advise members that the meeting will move into closed session at the end to discuss the issues which have emerged during the TRIPSI review? Can I declare the meeting open to the public? Agenda item 1, have we any apologies? Agenda item 2, Chairperson's business. Can I advise members that I and the Deputy Chairperson met with John Dallett yesterday to discuss the attacks on sheep being experienced by one of his constituents. A note of the meeting will be provided in the pack next week. I advise members that I and the Deputy Chairperson met with representatives from the Omagh Rural Community Association to discuss the TRIPSI review. Members already received a copy of the briefing provided, and that will be placed on the committee website. Can I advise members that the Minister is due to come to the committee next week to discuss the DART budget 2015-16, but this is depending on the budget being agreed by the Executive on the 15th of January. If the budget is not agreed by the Executive, then the Minister will not be in attendance, but she does intend coming to the committee as soon as the budget is agreed. Given that we may not know until late Thursday if the Minister will be attending, the Clerk has advised that the pack may have to issue on Friday morning rather than Thursday evening. Agenda item 3, minutes of the meeting 9th of December 2014. Can I refer members to the draft minutes of the meeting on the 9th of December 2014 at pages 6 to 11? Are members content that the draft minutes are accurate? If so, I will sign. Okay. Agenda item 4, matters arising. Can refer members to matters arising at page 15 to 43. Can refer members in particular to the information from DRD at page 35. This is of specific interest because of the work this committee has done on the reservoir bill. It would appear that Camla Reservoir, Neely Field, recently needed urgent remedial action. The fact that the reservoir was about to fail was only caught because the reservoir managers had hired a reservoir engineer who was out checking on this. This is a concrete example of why the reservoir bill is required. Are members content to action the rest of the matters arising as suggested on the index sheet on pages 13 and 14? Okay. Great. And item 5, oral briefing. DARD SEM for abolition of the Advisory Committee on Pesticides. I refer members to the memo from the Clerk at page 45, 47, and pages from the Department at page 48 to 69. Can I welcome Brian Irvine, Principal Officer, and Deborah Curry, Deputy Principal. Can I ask that you take up to 10 minutes to address the committee, and then that will be followed by questions, okay? You're very welcome. Okay.
Thank you, Chair and Committee. Yes, the Advisory Committee on Pesticides, the function of the body is to provide independent advice to Government through the 4 devolved administrations. And really, their key output essentially is whether a pesticide or an active substance is approved for use. Really, they examine, is it safe? Can there be controls put in place to make it safe, and so on. So essentially, they're the key advisory body determining for pesticides policy and essentially the safety of them. Now, this whole process we're in about the abolition of the committee will result in its re-establishment as an expert committee. So essentially, the committee will remain under a different name and status, but its functions and its members will remain the same. So this procedure is essentially an administrative change that has no real practical impact on the functions that the committee carries out. And in terms of the impact here with us, I suppose the Lee Constitution has actually enabled us to strengthen our role within the governance of the committee in a way, in that there are certain things now strengthened in the terms of reference that require our minister's agreement. So essentially, this is an administrative issue, and the functions will remain the same. The members of the committee will be offered to transfer to the new expert committee, and it's envisaged that they will. In terms of the committee itself, there's no one from Northern Ireland on the committee, but AFBI, representatives of AFBI sit as an observer on the committee, and AFBI are also involved in other committees related to pesticides. So really, AFBI would be carrying out the scientific work and analysis for DARD in terms of pesticides. And just by way of putting the committee in context on pesticides, there's a number of changes that have occurred legislatively, and we're now progressing with sort of a phase-in time, and that's all driven by the EU directive on the sustainable use of pesticides. And the result of that, there's really 4 things that will impact on farmers here. First of all, the range of substances that are approved for use is going to decrease over time due to a more rigorous assessment and approach at EU level. The Sustainable Use Directive requires the promotion of integrated pest management, which is looking at other ways of managing pests in order to reduce the use of chemicals. Then as well, there's a requirement for training and certification. Now, already farmers under a certain age are required to have certificates of competence. There was an exemption there that is being phased out, so older farmers who had relied on that exemption will need to gain a certificate of competence or look to somebody who has a certificate of competence to apply pesticides for them. And then the other 4th element is that spraying equipment and apparatus needs checked and tested at certain periods. So those changes, we have been working on communicating those to the industry, and they've been known about for a long time, and they're gradually been phased in. And in terms of the overall governance of pesticide, there's been a lot of good work done by the voluntary initiative, which is by the industry over a number of years. So those are just that's the context of it and the main issues going forward.
What you're saying in effect is cosmetic, almost cosmetic. I mean, yes, like there appears and supposed to be very little change, okay, but still in all you have to abolish the committee to form another committee. Yeah,
yes, exactly. There's quite, it would be fair to say, Chair, that there's a significant legislative process about this for really very little impact, but it's beyond our control, and we're just one of the devolved administrations carrying this through as a result of the public bodies and all that reorganisation. It was really started in 2010, 2011.
Well, as the committee is concerned, the committee that will be replaced this committee, will it have any different functions to the existing committee?
No, it's the same. So it's really an administrative issue and creating quite a bit of administration for all concerned around the table, I think. Yeah.
Okay. Anyone? Any questions on that?
Just help me, given what you have said there in response to the Chair, I mean, it's going to cost something. What is it costing and who's paying for it? These stringent times?
Yes, the functioning of the committee itself.
Yeah, well, the abolition.
Well, the abolition, I suppose, is a cost that's borne by DEFRA and the devolved administrations and officials working through this. The actual cost of the committee is fairly modest, and that's covered by DEFRA. So we have no direct payment of that, you know. So yes, there's the admin cost, but there's no change to, in a way, the cost structure of the committee, and the costs of the committee are modest.
Seems a bit odd and strange, but there we go.
Yes, that's right. It's driven by that government policy back in 2010, 2011 to cut the number of public bodies. And while this one has been cut, it's been replaced, it's been relabelled.
Very exciting. Thanks, Chair.
Tom again.
Can we be sure that this will not add an extra burden to farmers? For instance, in bureaucratic terms in a sense, you know, because no matter what changes within the agriculture industry, there's always a tendency that it adds more bureaucracy to the farmers themselves, and that's the last thing we want.
Yes, well, in terms of the Lee Constitutional Committee, that won't make any practical difference whatsoever, but in terms of the EU Sustainable Use Directive, yeah, that is going to add requirements on certain farmers, yes, and it's I suppose it's an inescapable EU requirement, looking for further certification and whatever. Now, in terms of the pesticides regulation and framework we have here, compared to other member states, it is fairly robust. But I suppose and there are a lot of good things done anyway. There are a lot of people have gone through CAFLE and had their training under City and Guilds for their PA courses and so on. I suppose the key impact will be on those older farmers who were relying on the exemption from gaining a certificate under a thing called grandfather rights. And basically, that now means that anybody over 50 currently could have relied on that exemption, but that will disappear at the end of this year. And there is training available, and CAFLE we've developed with City and Guilds across the various agricultural departments in the UK, along with City and Guilds and with UFU and stakeholders, developed a training course specifically for those grandfather rights holders to, I suppose, in a way, fast track them to get their certificate, or it's a slightly different course than the full course to begin with.
Then the reality is, if the farmer doesn't have the certificate, they can't use the pesticide, is that right?
Correct. Yes, it must be used by somebody, applied by somebody who has a certificate of competence.
Yeah.
Okay. Oliver McMullen, sorry. Oliver McMullen. Come on here. Go ahead, Oliver.
Right, sorry. Chair, well, you've answered part of it there. The young people are doing their level 2 can get this certificate of competence through that. Now, will there be a charge for anybody else? I mentioned, you said they're over 60.
Ready yourself.
Could that not be over 50?
It's over 50, over 50, so it's all right.
Well, anybody over 50, is there a charge for that now? Because we see charges in most things, so if anybody's looking for that test, does that cover them for 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, whatever, if they look for that certificate of competence?
The certificate covers them indefinitely for life, really. The cost, there's two elements. Firstly, there's a training which is provided by CAFLE, and there's no charge or cost for that. There is a legislation fee and a certification fee because it's run by City and Guilds, an assessment fee and a certification fee. And that's really inescapable.
How much?
I can't remember off the top of my head.
Not to worry, not to worry.
It's in the region of £100 to 120, somewhere in about that region, depending on what modules you take and what exact format of course it is.
Can a contractor get it to cover his business?
Oh yes, and we would envisage that contractors, unless they're relying on that exemption for being over 50, they will all be certified.
Yeah, good. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Sydney.
Thank you, Chair. Part of my apologies for being slightly late. And as part of the question has been answered, but where would these training courses take place? Are they going to be locally based for it to suit farmers, or where?
They are.
I mean, one of the first courses for this new grandfather rights type replacement course has been run at CAFLE Greenmount next month, and then they'll be rolled out. I mean, it's very much conscious that we need to make it easy for farmers to attend.
All be Greenmount?
No, they won't all be Greenmount.
Won't all be Greenmount.
Yeah.
We're referring to farmers here of having to get this certificate of competence. But what about anyone, myself even, applying pesticides? Do I need that, and do anyone who is applying pesticides needs this certificate?
No, it's professional users. Professional users.
So what constitutes a professional user? That's the next question.
Anyone who uses pesticides as part of their business, be it farming or as a contractor or as an amenity sprayer, if it's part of their business, they're deemed a professional user.
Right, so they have to register it somewhere and have to,
Yeah.
do they know, has this been well sort of documented? Do they know they need this?
Yeah, we have
specific-
publicised it through press articles and helping you comply bulletins. Yep, and we continue to publicise those, make it clear. And we've been working with UFU on it for quite some
Like every
time.
new legislation coming in, Brian, there will be those who probably slip through the net here because they're not aware, maybe. So
Yeah.
maybe it has to be a bit of work done to make and educate them that they need this.
Yes, well, we consistently have articles in the DARD Helping You Comply bulletin, which goes to all businesses in the seat of single farm payment. And as well, there's been, with those has been included cards, reply paid cards for registering your interest for the courses as well. So yes, we have an extensive publicity campaign on it, targeted at, going to all in the seat of single farm payment.
So these courses obviously will take place more or less as when the new legislation takes place.
Yes,
as quickly as possible.
Yes.
But will they be ongoing for ones who are on stream?
Oh yes,
Continuously?
there has been an ongoing programme of the other courses, the PA1, PA2 and so on, through Carthley for many years, and this new course is essentially a bolt-on to address a specific need.
Okay.
Okay, thanks very much.
Okay, thank you. I see that AFB has, in the existing committees, has an advisory role. Will that continue into the new?
Yes, it will.
An advisory role, do you think is adequate to represent Northern?
Yes, it is, because government reps on that committee sit as in an advisory role rather than an independent member. Now, I mean, it's open to our experts within AFB if they wish to apply to be an independent member when those, there's a call for an application period or whatever, but they haven't as such. They're quite happy with their advisory role and they're able to then feed back to us various issues that are coming out of the committee.
Okay. Okay, if there's no other questions, can I refer members to the wording of the draft motion at page 47? This motion, which will be tabled by the Minister, will seek the consent of the Assembly for the abolition of the Advisory Committee on Pesticides. The committee are asked to agree to the motion. This Assembly consents to the public body's abolition of the Advisory Committee on Pesticides, Order 2015, in the form of the draft laid before the UK Parliament on the 15th of December 2014. Are members content? Agreed. Okay. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
We'll move on to agenda item 6. We have an oral briefing on the dairy market. Can I refer members to the research paper at pages 71 to 84? Can I welcome Mark Allen, Assembly Research Officer? Mark, welcome. Can we ask you to brief the committee on your research into the dairy market in the Republic of Ireland?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members. And I suppose it is very much focused on south of the border. I know you're getting a briefing really in relation to the situation here. Thereafter, I suppose what I really want to do just in the first thing is really provide it looks really just an overview of the current state. Challenges as well that the industry faces, and I'll touch upon some of the issues relating, for example, to the Russian import ban and in terms of development of the Chinese market and the current status there. I suppose the first thing I want to say is that I suppose members are well aware that the parlous state of the dairy industry, and has been well documented. I suppose the most recent headline really out of the south, if any of you have been aware in the press in December, was the projection at that point that they were effectively looking at a projected 50% decrease in income in 2015. That was what Chagas were looking at, and that was, I suppose, was dominating the press really prior to Christmas. I suppose the first thing I want to really touch upon is the strategic direction for the development of the dairy industry down south. And I suppose there's really one current key document there and one going forward, which is in development at the moment. The current one, not surprisingly, the Agri-Food Strategy, Food Harvest 2020. And I suppose there are specific dairy headline targets there. The one that I'm sure many members will have heard of, which is the 50% increase in milk production. which is really, if you take the figures from 2008 and 9, which was the baseline for Food Harvest 2020, that'll see a growth of milk production from 5 billion litres to 7.5 billion litres by 2020. There's also a growth in exports was targeted. This, I suppose, is part of the overall aim for a 40% growth in agricultural and agri-food exports. Growth in employment, the concepts as well of sustainable returns and reduced greenhouse gas emissions. There were also a number of elements set out, more specific recommendations under a number of themes relating to the dairy industry. I'm not going to go through those. Suffice to say they're set out in Table 1, which is pages 72 to 73, but they touch on areas like milk processing, farm competitiveness, technology transfer. Going forward, I suppose, from a strategic point of view, the Department for Agriculture, Food and the Marine in the South is currently in the process of preparing a national strategy for the agri-food sector up to 2025. So it's effectively the 5 years beyond Food Harvest 2020. And that's really looking to consolidate and build upon the work that Food Harvest 2020 has done. To date, that we haven't a lot of information around that. The consultation actually only closed there on the 9th of January, so last week. There were, however, some background documents published relating to various sectors, and I will actually draw upon that and elements of the report that I'm looking at here, because there was a specific dairy sector one. Turning then to the current status of the dairy industry, a wee bit of background, I suppose, on it. There's about 18,000 milk suppliers supplying to 90 registered milk purchasers in the Republic of Ireland. 82% of the milk produced is processed by the 6 major processors. That's Glanbia, Kerry, Dairygold, Lakeland, Arrivo and Arabon. The top 6,000 milk producers account for 60% of the milk supplied. And the age profile of the sector, it's 52% of the dairy farmers are over 50 years of age. In terms of the number of dairy cows, I think there has been a very notable trend of growth in the number of dairy cattle within the Republic of Ireland. Take the reference period, really, December 2005 to December 13, which is the period that we have stats for. There were extra 86,700 cattle over that period. That was a 8.7% increase in the dairy cattle population. That trend, I suppose, has been sustained year on year, really, particularly between 2010 and 13. It coincides really with the projection for the 50% growth in Food Harvest 2020. So it's very clearly tied to that, and that's when the growth really took off, 2010. In terms of the farm gate price for milk, I think it's important to say that January 2014 really was the high point for the milk price in the south, and that since this date the real price has fallen back. The actual annual average national milk price for 2014, this is inclusive of VAT, was actually estimated about 37.6 cents per litre. However, I think it's worth noting that Teagasc, who I suppose are the South's equivalent of AFBI, have really put on record their opinion that producers in the South have really yet to experience the full downturn in the milk commodity price. So that 37.6 cent, it probably isn't as low as it may well have even reached at this stage. Bearing in mind that this paper was prepared in December. The other thing I want to touch then upon is, and this may be a better indicator as to where income is going, the gross output, total cost and net income per hectare. The Teagasc outlook for 2015, that's on figure 4 on page 77, really shows that 2014 has actually been estimated to be quite a good year for the Irish dairy industry. Net margins were actually 2% higher than those recorded for 2013. I suppose, but what is interesting for 2014, it was marked by lower gross output, but by lower costs. It was an indication again of how much volatility there can be within this market. Turning to, I suppose, a key issue is relation in production relating to quota. The quota system, I suppose, as you will all know, expires on the 31st of March this year. I suppose on figure 5 there on page 78, I've shown the fact that the Republic of Ireland has actually exceeded its milk quota allocation in 2014-15. 13-14, and is likely to do so again for 14-15. The interesting thing here, I suppose, is that if you take the 13-14 figures for last year, we were down south were 0.6% over quota. That led to a €10 million super levy. According to data from the actual department at the end of November, at that point Ireland was 6.51% over quota. So, you know, you read between the lines, I think the implication is there's going to be a more significant super levy coming from Europe in relation to their level of production for 14-15, bearing in mind that beyond the 31st of March, quota doesn't apply. In terms of a bit of background on the progress of the dairy industry, particularly against that target, I don't want to go into a lot of detail here. Suffice to say that between 2010 and now, there has been a 10% growth in volume. That's, I suppose, set against this target of 50%. So in a 3-year period, it has grown 10%. That's despite the restrictions imposed by quota. So it gives you an indication of the rise in production that there has been down south. Touching then briefly on the Chinese dairy market, which I suppose is often cited as a potential area for growth for dairy export. And if you look at Table 2 on page 79, I've really provided there a summary of the source of skimmed milk powder imports into China. I think what's interesting to say here is that imports from Ireland have actually risen by 14.8% over the last year. But whilst the Irish market share has grown, it does need to be noted that in overall terms, Chinese imports have declined compared to the previous year. And I suppose if you look at the decline in that, I mean, whole milk powder imports are down 72%. Skimmed milk powder down 27% and butter down 39%. Cheese was the only commodity that bucked the trend there. It does, I suppose, however, I've seen, as I say, there be a drop in demand or for Chinese importation of dairy product. Set against that, however, the OECD and the FAO are still predicting a rising demand for dairy product within China up until 2022. They, in fact, are actually looking at the dairy import growth is likely to rise by about 60% over that period, largely as a result of slower growth in domestic production. So China do produce milk, but at this point their domestic production is not sufficient to meet demand. The other big ticket item, I suppose, in the news in recent months has been the Russian import ban over the last year and the impact there. To jog members' memory, I suppose, on the 7th of August 2014, the Russian government announced a 1-year ban, import ban for a range of EU agricultural commodities, and that included milk and dairy products. I suppose, in terms of the impact this has had down south, the initial assessment by Minister Simon Coveney was that this wasn't going to be as significant as it would be for other EU member states in the short and medium term. Because at that point, Ireland's agri-food export trade with Russia really represented less than 2.5% of total agri-food export. There was, I suppose, some element there of, if you take Ireland's dairy exports to Russia, they were €17.8 million in 2013, and €11.3 million of that was made up of casein. I think the EU Commission has further confirmed the fact that the Russian import ban hasn't really impacted down south to the same extent as others. I published some information there in the paper you can see in terms of the countries been affected most. It's the Netherlands, Finland, Latvia, Germany and Poland, and they have significantly greater degrees of export in terms of value to Russia than Ireland. In relation to EU market mechanisms, and I have to say this is particularly pertinent in relation to the Russian import ban, if you can see there, Table 4 on page 81, that really sets out the mechanisms available to the European Commission under Regulation 1308/1213, where they can effectively make intervention in the market. I don't want to go through these in great detail. Sufficient to say there's intervention, export refunds, private storage aid. I suppose in view of the Russian import ban, what was significant was that on the 28th of August, the European Commission said it would open private storage aid for butter, skimmed milk powder and certain cheeses. It then closed it on the 23rd of September. There was a bit of abuse by some member states who ordinarily didn't export to Russia but were claiming a refund, shall we say, for storage, which again, it has reopened. There are mechanisms there in place, and indeed Commissioner Phil Hogan, speaking in December in his maiden speech, highlighted his intention that those mechanisms would be available beyond this January. So as we currently sit, to my best of my knowledge, they're still available. The other thing I'm supposed to say is that the Irish government position is, I suppose, basically in simple terms, that they want to ensure that as part of the new CAP, that the European Commission seeks to mitigate the worst impact of downward price volatility by using whatever mechanisms it has to hand, which, as I said, are intervention, export refunds, or private storage aid. In closing, I just want to touch upon some of the future challenges or issues that the industry down south is facing. And I suppose what I'm drawing upon very heavily here is Teagasc, both outlook for 2015 and the work in terms of the background paper, as I mentioned, for their strategy from up to 2025. So I suppose the first thing to say that I think Teagasc again are projecting that Irish milk production will increase by 10% in 2015 relative to the 2014 level, and that the bulk of that expansion will come from existing cows and existing farms. They're also saying that they believe international dairy market prices will remain depressed in the first half of 2015, and while the price recovery may take hold as the year progresses, the possibility also exists that the weak condition could continue throughout the year. They are also expecting in 2015 an annual average decrease in milk prices of about 28%. Net margin per litre is forecast to fall by 82% in 2015 to an average of 2 cents per litre. So again, this I suppose is relating, as I said, to the projection for the 50% drop in income. The other thing I suppose it's important to say here is that in terms of net margins per litre, I've touched on there, but equally in terms of margins per hectare, those are likely to fall substantially in 2015 compared to 2014. Average net margins are likely to be no more than €300 per hectare. And as I mentioned, just to emphasise again, Ireland will be facing a super levy, significantly higher than it has done in the past, given to the level of production in excess of. Just the other thing is just to say that I'm looking a wee bit further to 2025. There is, I suppose, Teagasc and the AFM have quite a positive outlook for the international dairy prices, but that is, I suppose, based on a number of assumptions. Really, predominantly, I suppose, the continued strong growth in incomes among developing countries. I suppose their demand for dairy product. If those economies don't grow, well, demand for dairy product would drop, and vis-a-vis the price would as well. The other one, I suppose, is, and I did touch upon here, is Chinese self-sufficiency. It is a Chinese, I suppose, target to be self-sufficient in agricultural production. That's a key determinant on world price. It's currently expected Chinese milk production will start to grow again, and that's late 2014 and 15. But any delay in that will only effectively enable the world price to remain higher. The other factor we've touched upon, obviously, the end of milk quotas now at the end of March. And I suppose the FAO-OECD outlook seems to be a gradual, smooth transition in terms of production. I suppose Teagasc and other observers, including the dairy sector down south, maybe have more concern about the fact that there could be a significant spike in production across the EU and the impact that obviously will have on price, oversupply, impacting effectively demand. The other things just touched upon, and I think they are relevant, are the nature of unusual weather. We're well aware a number of years ago the impact that can have to have a wet winter. Environmental legislation as well, it could be a risk for the dairy industry going forward, both in terms of greenhouse gas emissions and any policy changes maybe in relation to water quality. So there's a range of features there that could impact it from an environmental legislative standpoint. And the only other thing, I suppose, is in closing, is market impacting potential from free trade agreements and/or regional trade agreements through specific market access changes and the simplification of bilateral sanitary requirements. So that, I suppose, is really much it's a race through that. I appreciate there's a lot in that, but I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark, for the briefing and for the detail. You note that the Republic of Ireland faces a large super levy bill again, probably even higher than last year. Given that situation, how likely is it that the Republic of Ireland would support intervention or export refunds? They seem reluctant at the moment. Support that?
I think, again, I suppose when I mentioned Simon Coveney's statement, that was the statement on the 10th of December, I think it was, and he wasn't committal. I think it's safe to say on what he said. He was basically saying, well, I hope the Commission avails of whatever mechanisms it has to ensure that price volatility doesn't have an impact. That, I suppose, maybe wasn't as strong a statement as he could have made. Yeah. Read into that, I suppose, what you may, but I think there was some disappointment in some sectors that he maybe wasn't stronger in terms of what he was calling for. suppose regardless of the fact, as I said, that the Commission still had the options open, and I suppose as Commissioner Hogan has emphasised, they have utilised those over the last year where appropriate, and continue to monitor the situation with a view to if they require them again.
Okay. Yeah, there is concerns across the board of large growth in production down south could affect Northern Ireland, as you're aware. So Northern Ireland actually has doubled their production this last 25 years probably, where because of milk quotas, the Irish Republic was held. Joanne?
Thank you, Chair. Mark, thank you as ever for a very comprehensive and easy to understand briefing.
Thank you.
When we've had presentations before, I don't know if you've been sitting in some of them, but we keep hearing the banks must be more understanding. You've featured on the Republic of Ireland, but here, locally, intervention, possibility, proven efficiency. I was interested to hear you refer to the national strategy being built up in the Republic of Ireland. Now, I know you said it's just closed this week or
Yes.
last week, so you don't have a lot of detail yet.
No.
Is there any lessons we can learn? Because dairy farmers are saying, we always seem to be playing catch up with the Republic of Ireland. They're always seen as leading, whereas, you know, what should we be doing here, or what can you outline any more about their strategy?
I think I'm reluctant, I suppose, to say, Joanne, because I suppose at this point that there aren't even proposals. The proposals will be coming forward from the Minister in June, but I think reading between the lines that effectively the emphasis will be building upon and consolidating Food Harvest 2020. I think it's fair to say that there will be elements carried over there. I mean, the big one, as I mentioned, is the growth and development of export markets. Undoubtedly continues to be something that down south are very focused on, whether that's for example, for infant powder or for other products. I mean, it could well be looking, I suppose, from our perspective, is there more that we could do there? I'm reluctant to say much beyond that, but I think there, as I said, a number of those themes, I'd be surprised if they don't feature again in terms of maybe competitiveness, research and development and applying that, maybe looking at new product lines. But the export drive and I suppose that was really what, in Food Harvest 2020, ramp up production to export. So I suppose that the two go hand in hand, and I can't really see that changing significantly. So there maybe is a question there for us.
They're doing something. That's something that
I think there's-
keep hearing, I'm sure other committee members keep hearing, is what is our department doing? You know, we're hearing, as I said earlier, banks are being more efficient. The dairy farmers out there want to see something been done and some sort of, you know.
Well, and when I say that the projection there is the document will carry up to 2025, so it's a considerable period looking into the future, but I mean there's definitely is quite a work going on there in terms of development of strategy
It's definitely
across the
something-
agri-food sector.
Yeah, we need to learn here. Suppose it's not fair to ask, but I don't know whether you want to comment or not, but your assessment, you talked about the increased production. The end of the quotas, as you said, we're a matter of weeks away from the end of the quotas. What impact will you think it'll have on our industry here, given the fact that Bord Bia is increasing export? You know, that's certainly a big concern among our dairy farmers, that we're going to be, the Republic of Ireland is going to flood Northern Ireland with all their milk.
I suppose it's too early to say, maybe, and that's maybe a get out of jail now, but I think from the figures, I mean, as I said, what the evident trend has been that there has been a rise in production over the last 3 years. And as I said, we're only 10% of the way towards the doubling of production. So if that level of liquid milk or whatever form it comes onto the market, it's bound to have an impact in terms of on the island of Ireland or maybe wider. As I say, there was a 10% growth within the restriction of quota.
Yeah.
So with quota gone, I mean, you could be looking at a significant expansion. As I said, the Teagasc are actually projecting a 10% growth in this year. So, I mean, I think
So it is very worrying for us here in Northern
I
Ireland.
suppose it raises the question again of where does milk go and what could our local industry best do with the milk it produces. And I suppose a lot of it again, and how much of down south is being produced for the local market or how much is being produced for export and in what form. Is it as basic milk, skim milk powder, or is it as a cheese or an added value product? So there's questions, I suppose, there that I suppose at this point it's maybe hard to assess, but the overwhelming reality is that production down south will continue to increase in line with the 2020 target.
We're right to be concerned here.
I suppose the one downer on that could well be, I suppose, and it's the cautionary note on it, is if the price remains depressed, either due oversupply or effectively if people choose to say, well, I'm not prepared to invest over the next few years, it could stall or it could contract. Because I suppose, again, milk and the nature of milk as a commodity, it's subject effectively to the pressures of a world market. So if you look at the strategic document, it's growth, 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 but maybe the financial realities, maybe there could be farmers, and I think there is anecdotal evidence, and when I was looking at the press down south prior to Christmas, where some farmers were saying, I may not invest, I may stay where I'm at until I see if I'm going to get a return on my investment. But that's, I mean, that can change, as we're aware, even in the beef industry, and on a weekly, nearly on a monthly basis.
Yeah.
So there's quite a bit of volatility remains there.
Okay. Thanks, Mark.
Okay. Mark, I mean, I would have thought, and similar to what the theme in your response to the previous member, the price could curtail any increase in the Republic of Ireland and could dictate exactly what happens down there.
Absolutely, and as I emphasised the point, I think Teagasc, even in their analysis, said that you know, the figure that they had, the average figure for 2014, they were very clear that producers hadn't felt the full impact of commodity price reductions. They've been somewhat insulated at that point. So I mean, that I think it's logical, yes, to apply that and say that could well have an impact upon someone's decision whether to invest or stay where they're at.
Okay. Joe Byrne.
Yeah, Chairman, again, like others, I watched the presentation by Mark in the paper. I suppose the conundrum is, how is he going to continue to expand milk production if the price forecast is still a downward spiral? Is there anything in the type of production they have or cost of production that's different from us? I know there are some dairy farmers in the south that wean off cows or dry off cows, and they don't milk it actually in the winter months. So I'm wondering, is there any figures about, have they any competitive advantage in terms of production costs, maybe less than ours? And secondly, is the actual milk processing a factor in determining what's going to happen in the long term? Because I think you pointed out they have quite a few milk processors, whereas we don't have as many different ones here. Thanks, Chairman.
I suppose on the first, it wasn't something I looked at, it's something we could look at, our production costs higher. I mean, to draw upon maybe members' previous experience in relation to Teagasc and the beef sector, I think that part of the research and development emphasis is very much on efficiency and driving down costs. I suppose to counter that, maybe the dairy sector would be recognised, I think, in down south and here as well, as one of the most efficient sectors. But quite happy to look at that. The other issue in relation to processing, again, I didn't look at, but I remember looking at this previously for the committee, and there were issues and concerns at that point whether there was the processing capacity in the island of Ireland, particularly if there was a 50% increase in production down south. I suppose at this point, I'm not picking up any indication that is the case at this point. But again, happy to go away and look and see, are there concerns around that, or is there investment in processing capacity as we speak?
Thanks. Okay. Tom, I'll get first, yeah.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Mark. Apologies, I missed the start of your presentation. Just a couple of points. You mentioned about, you know, the level of production going up and going down, you know, reasonably quickly, but it can go down quickly simply because the issue around you can get rid of cattle or you can move cattle on at it quickly, but you can't bring in new stock on a short-term basis. So I'm just wondering how that bodes for the future. Like, is the predictions that it's going to go right up until 2025?
The Irish sector.
Irish, yeah.
I suppose the Teagasc aren't projecting up as far as that. I suppose and the figures I was looking, their outlook was 2015, Tom, but I think within the immediate to short term, they are projecting, I suppose, a rise. But I suppose the emphasis they're saying again is it's on existing farms. With, I think, just bear with me a minute, I'll actually read the reference to it. In terms of new entrants to the market, I don't think Teagasc are picking that up. Let me see. Yeah, will come from existing cows on existing farmland. So their 2015 projection isn't that there will be a significant growth in the herd as of this year. This was the 2010-13 period. As I said, there has been significant growth. But at this early stage, and in their December outlook for 2015, that didn't seem to be relating to additional cows being added in significant numbers in 2015. Beyond that, I suppose, and that equally could change. I suppose, again, as I said to the Chair, if the market price per litre rises, well, undoubtedly people may well respond. But there's still, you're right, is a lag from that response and the impact of the actual increased volume of milk on the market.
Yeah. And what about the Irish monthly production? I know that the Irish have always relied quite a lot on the spring calvers, whereby you would have the high volume of milk, you know, right through from starting in January, peaking in probably April, May, June, and then levelling off, and then very little winter milk. Whereas in Northern Ireland, it has always been different, whereby, you know, they have relied on milk coming in from maybe Northern Ireland or even GB. Has that pattern changed anything?
I think, this is anecdotal because I'm not definitive on it, but I think even reading in terms of how the South manages their threat of super levy, I think they continue to utilise that mechanism.
Okay.
Because, for example, there were indications that the overproduction sitting in November, that would be managed in the latter months of the year.
It's easier to manage it.
It is.
Use that
It is,
pattern.
which would lead me to, I can't say definitively, would suggest that that model is still being utilised.
Yeah.
Again, it wasn't one I looked at specifically, but I'm happy to go away and look at in terms of the fluctuation in monthly volume that comes to market.
The one point, Chair, I'd be interested in is if that has changed over the last, say, 10 years, you know, if there's been a significant change in the last 10 years,
Okay.
To see if that pattern is moving towards a more level yearly production throughout the year. It might be useful just to get that wee bit of information.
I'll see what I can turn on. I'm happy to do that.
Okay, because it would still sound to me that in the Republic, milk production is still largely based on grass, whereas up here, you know, it's different where you have the more intensive units. So just wondering if that changing to any degree, though.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, Edmund Poots.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Just in terms of it, strikes me the Republic are gearing up, you know, to expand quickly after super levy goes. And that's probably why they have a larger super levy this year, because they have been bringing those cows into production. Obviously, they'll get a couple of more lactations out of them, maybe 2.5 more lactations out of them in the process of doing that. And I suppose we can look at expansion in the Republic with a fear factor, or we can accept the reality that it's likely to take place and look at how we can make an even more efficient dairy sector. We have a pretty efficient dairy sector, but when you look at the levels of production coming out of a country like New Zealand, you know, it successfully produces milk, and, you know, massive quantities of milk compared to what we're doing here. So there's a market out there in the world if we're competitive enough to go to that market. And, you know, we talk about milk at 25p a litre and so forth. Can we, you know, reduce production costs further? Can our processors be more efficient in how they deliver it? And I think we need to be looking at the market in that sort of way. And what is being done on that front, both by Teagasc, NAFBI and others, to allow that to happen?
I think in summary, I suppose, again, a lot of this again relates to, I suppose, as to what markets are you targeting, because I suppose there's a limit to how much milk can remain within the island of Ireland or even in the UK. So there's the international dimension. It's a global commodity, as you rightly said, in relation to production. I think one of the challenges we face, maybe comparing us to New Zealand, and I've heard it said often, is that New Zealand doesn't operate to the same environmental regulation, for example, as farmers within the EU would operate. Or animal welfare requirements as well. I suppose there are options there as to how you maybe could promote your product. The type of product that you sell as well is obviously a key one. I mean, down south in Food Harvest 2020 did, for example, target and identify infant powder as a key export driver, particularly for Asian and Chinese markets. And I suppose up in very blunt terms, that was in response to public health scares in China in relation to fraudulent powder or a fraudulent product. So I suppose there are opportunities. It's a question, I suppose, as to how you gear up. I suppose Food Harvest 2020 and the proposed strategy definitely give that consideration. And there is thought about what they want to produce, where they want to produce it, to what standard, what type of product, and where they want to sell it.
I think we benefit from a problem with New Zealand powdered milk at one stage. New Zealand was subsequently really cleared of that.
Yes,
That
you
issue
can.
and problem, so that has had an impact as well.
You can, and I mean, you could. What would to stop Northern Ireland or down south, for example, marketing and saying, well, we have a higher animal welfare standard, or we have a higher environmental standard. There are options there which are explored. To touch just finally on your point in terms of research and knowledge and, I suppose, efficiency, again, as I emphasised, Food Harvest 2020, that's an integral part of it. There were specific recommendations, and I can give you the ones here very quickly. I didn't go into them, they were on the table. If you take foreign competitiveness, we talk about the need for a coordinated national approach, genetic improvement, supporting a best practice approach to animal health to improve the quality of milk. You know, so there is very detailed work which is actually leading to Teagasc research, which will then be applied, I suppose, to the actual farmers on the ground. So that's probably, that thought has definitely been given. It's very clear in the documentation that they have.
And essentially, we have already done an awful lot of this. You know, we can make improvement, but it's more difficult to make improvement from the position that we're in because we are a pretty efficient dairy herd at this point.
I suppose it's not, I'm not, I suppose, going to comment on that because I'm not in a position to know what's around the corner, but I suppose, is there a limit to efficiency? That's maybe is the question. I'm not, I suppose, in a position to comment at this point, but I think that there are definitely, I think any strategy down south has definitely focused on the fact that there's a continuing and ongoing need to conduct research to ensure that the production methods, systems and the stock from which milk or other products are being produced, be it beef even, is the best that it can be to maximise profit and the most efficient system. So, you know, I think it's probably a good rule to operate by in that regard.
So their strategy of doubling the milk herd, they obviously believe that they can sustain a milk price which is going to be over and above costs and double their herd at the same time.
Well, I suppose
no doubt there'll be painful moments as you go on that travel on that journey, but when they get to the ultimate conclusion of that, they're obviously of the opinion, and I assume that there's been a considerable amount of research that the market can absorb the amount of milk that they're going to be putting up additional, in conjunction with whatever other countries are doing as well.
Yeah, well, I think, I mean, the 50% increase in volume, I mean, that it could be a doubling of or an increased number of cattle, but it equally could, as you know, the point is made, it could be better stock that produce more. So you may not actually, I suppose there's a lot of things to be offset here in terms of the environmental impact through a greater number of cows. As I mentioned, in terms of legislatively going forward, that could present problems, but you're right, those issues have been considered, and I think that it's in Food Harvest 2020 as a target which they believe was going to be achievable by 2020. And I did emphasise the fact that in the 3 years since the report has been published, they have, on the basis of the most recent update in terms of delivery, already achieved 10% of that growth. So I mean, that's the 50% you would imagine in those terms would be well achievable within a 10-year period.
Do you say it's 5 years already up?
It was 2010.
Yes. So they're halfway in the only because of quotas probably.
Within the restriction of quota, yeah, which is, I suppose, as emphasised, was the key point there.
Okay. That has been one benefit for the Northern Ireland dairy farmer because it's been part of the UK. The UK has been able to fill quota now for a good number of years. Therefore, the Northern Ireland farmers benefited from that. Any other questions? No? Thank you very much, Mark. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much.
Turn to agenda item 7. We have an oral briefing from the Dairy Policy Branch of the Dairy Market. Can I refer members to the memo from the clerk at pages 86 to 87, a briefing paper from the department at pages 88 to 94. Previous correspondence from the UFU has also been included at page 95. An update from the UFU following concerns raised at the Winter Fair at pages 101. The Minister's reply to a letter from myself on the issue has been included at page 102 and 3. Can I welcome Let McMaster, grade 5, Stephen Miller, grade 6, and we have Seamus McAlern, Principal Agricultural Economist. I'm going to ask you to take up to 10 minutes to give your presentation and then we will ask questions. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Chairman and committee members, for the opportunity to provide a briefing on the Northern Ireland dairy industry. I have colleagues with me, Stephen Miller, Head of Agri-Food Support Services, and Seamus McErlean, Principal Agricultural Economist. The briefing document that we've sent to the committee outlines the importance of the Northern Ireland dairy sector, the recent drop in milk prices and action taken by the Minister and DARD to support the dairy industry at this time, and also current trade negotiations. In opening remarks, I'll give a brief summary of the dairy sector and the work that DARD is doing to support the agri-food industry and specifically the dairy sector in achieving its ambitions for sustainable growth and dealing with the challenges that it faces. As the committee is very aware, agri-food is one of the most successful industries in Northern Ireland. The dairy sector makes a significant contribution to the Northern Ireland agri-food industry. It accounts for 33% of gross agricultural output and provides employment on over 3,000 farms. It's a gross turnover of around £1 billion and employs over 2,000 people in the processing sector, which makes it the 5th largest employer in the food and drinks processing sector. The Northern Ireland dairy industry is progressive and has shown a proven track record for growth and a good reputation for its dairy farming. With a small local market for dairy output, the dairy industry here is heavily export focused, with over 70% of the milk produced going to export markets, mainly in the form of bulk dairy products such as milk powders, cheese and butter. There are opportunities and challenges facing the dairy sector now and in the future. In the global context, it is anticipated that the demand for dairy products will grow faster than supply, creating growth opportunities in international markets. At the same time, it's anticipated that the dairy industry will continue to face greater volatility in milk prices as it trades in global markets. Growing a vibrant economy is an important priority for the Executive. The Executive included a commitment in the programme for government to develop a strategic action plan for the agri-food sector, and DARD and DEDI appointed the industry-led Agri-Food Strategy Board to make recommendations to be included in that plan. And for growth includes more than 100 recommendations aimed at accelerating the growth of the agri-food industry to 2020 and beyond. These recommendations extend across the entire agri-food industry, as well as to individual sectors, including the dairy sector. In response, the Executive has agreed an action plan outlining actions to be progressed across relevant departments, including by DARD. DARD has a strategic goal to help the agri-food industry prepare for future market opportunities and economic challenges. The Department will continue to support the dairy sector's growth ambitions through a range of measures, including education and training, technical and business support, and research to improve competitiveness and innovation. In addition, support will be provided under the next Rural Development Programme 2014 to 2020, including the proposed Farm Business Improvement Scheme of up to £250 million as requested by the Agri-Food Strategy Board, the Agri-Food Processing Investment Scheme and cooperation measures to encourage supply chain integration. Officials have also been working with dairy exporters on finding alternative export markets following the Russian import ban. A Dairy International Trade Working Group has been established with the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine in Dublin for discussing mechanisms for facilitating access to third country markets for dairy companies from across the island of Ireland. Turning now to milk prices. As you're aware, prices in European and global markets have been falling for a number of months and are feeding through to the prices received by producers. There's little doubt this is due to an increase in EU and global milk production, combined with the residual impact of the Russian import ban and the fact that demand in China has fallen compared with last year. Milk prices have fallen from a high of 34.72 pence per litre in November 2013 to 25.09 pence per litre in October 2014, and that's a huge drop. Although if you look at over the average, the price paid to producer for the first 10 months of 2014 was 30.26 pence per litre compared with 30.78 pence per litre for the same period in 2013. As already stated, price volatility is part and parcel of trading in global markets. There are times, like at the end of 2013 and the early months of this year, when the market delivers record prices, followed by times as at present when prices are low. Whilst the price paid to producers and the pricing structure used by milk purchasers is a commercial matter and therefore not within DARD's remit, the Minister is supportive of the dairy industry and the Department's doing all we can to assist producers at this difficult time. This includes actions that seek to impact at EU and UK levels as well as locally. In particular, Following the introduction of the Russian ban on imports of agri-food products, the Minister wrote to the DEFRA Secretary of State expressing her concerns and pressing her to lobby for appropriate support for the dairy sector. The Minister also met with Commissioner Chalice in early September when she highlighted the impact that the Russian ban was having on our dairy industry and requested that the Commission explores alternative markets for products. Officials have been working with dairy exporters on finding alternative markets following the Russian ban, and it's good to note that one of our exporters recently entered the Japanese market. This is a major coup, not only for the exporter but also the wider dairy industry. The Department's dairy advisors continue to provide technical support and have been disseminating relevant information to dairy farmers on managing cash flow. Briefing on this has been provided to the Ulster Farmers Union. The Minister met with the Ulster Farmers Union to discuss their cash flow concerns when a number of measures to help farmers were discussed. In particular, she suggested a joint meeting with the banks, and this took place on the 18th of December. It was an opportunity for her to advise the banks that she believed that the fundamentals for the dairy sector are good in the longer term, and to ask them to be sympathetic and flexible in their approach to farmers in the coming months as regards the repayment of loan capital. Overall, it was a constructive and worthwhile meeting. With dairy farmers facing a difficult winter, the Minister wrote again to Elizabeth Truss in advance of the December Agriculture and Fisheries Council, outlining the importance of the dairy sector and explaining that, unlike GB, it is heavily reliant on export markets. She sought her support in discussions in Brussels on help for the dairy sector and requested that the Commission examines the current intervention system and assesses whether it adequately fulfils the role of providing an effective safety net. The Minister was disappointed that at the Council debate, Commissioner Hogan rejected calls for additional support, such as increasing the intervention price or using export refunds. She's seeking an early meeting with him to press the case for further support for the industry. The paper provided to committee members also provides a brief synopsis on the current trade negotiations between the EU and Canada, between the EU and the USA. The negotiations with Canada have been finalised but have still to be approved both by the EU and the Canadian lawmakers. The negotiations with the USA are ongoing and there's still some way to go. Thank you. That's all I want to say at this point. We're happy to answer questions. Also, if members have questions we are unable to answer today, we'll of course be happy to provide follow-up information after the meeting.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation. In your briefing, you outlined some of the actions taken by the Minister, and the Minister written to the DEPRA Secretary of State. Did the response come back from DEPRA Secretary of State on that?
I'm not sure that there was a response has come back. What the Minister asked for was to have meetings with her, which she then did before the council meetings, both in September and in December. She had meetings with the Secretary of State.
Okay, that have already taken place.
Yeah.
Has the Minister met with Commissioner yet, Hogan, on this issue?
Commissioner is seeking to meet with Commissioner Hogan about dairy matters. Permanent Secretary met with the Commissioner Hogan's cabinet in early December and following up with the request for a meeting with Commissioner Hogan, so the Minister has asked for that, so I'm hoping that will happen soon.
We have a letter from the Farmers Union here, and there is predictions that prices will further drop further this month and next month by further 3 pence per litre, which will, even for the most efficient dairy farmer, record a loss. The average pricing that you did give us is for the previous year, what's up till December, which has been relatively good up to the last couple of months. But certainly, do you accept that things look quite grim coming into this next few months?
I mean, the department, does absolutely realise the difficulties facing dairy farmers at this stage, and that may well, and if the price is going to drop further, then obviously there are going to be difficulties facing the industry. So currently, as I've said, what we've done in recent times, as well as providing the advice to farmers, for this immediate, because this is an immediate issue, and price volatility is something that will remain and will be with us, but certainly dairy advisors have been putting advice out to the industry, to farmers, and officials have met with the banks along with the Minister as well. So yes, we recognise the issues.
Yes, and in that meeting, the banks were relatively supportive, were they?
Yes, yes, they were. In fact, I'll maybe ask my colleague, Stephen Miller,
Yeah.
to comment on that. Stephen was at the meeting.
I was at the meeting. It was, by all accounts, everybody there came away feeling very positive about the meeting, the Farmers Union, the banks and the department. There was some frank talking, and the banks agreed to be proactive, approaching their customers and asking them to, engage. The department advisors would also engage proactively and reactively with farmers and helping them analyse their analyse their business and plot a way forward. So everybody came away reasonably content. Yeah.
Okay. I suppose just declaring interest, being a dairy farmer. My son runs a farm at home. Joanne Dobson.
Thanks, Chair. I'm a beef farmer, so you're safe enough. Colette, in your briefing, you referred to your buzzwords were opportunities and challenges. And I know from meeting with so many dairy farmers over Christmas recess and well before it, they certainly feel that they're very challenging times ahead for our local industry. And many are concerned, and I know I've voiced this before, about the long-term consequences for their business, for their families, for their mental health. There's so many issues with the volatility of the market, and they're seeing their livelihoods disappear. I know you were listening in, you heard the excellent briefing that we had from our researcher, Mark Allen, prior to your presentation. So if I can touch on just some of the points, I know he focused on our Republic of Ireland and you're focused here on our local farmers. Given that we're now in the year when weeks away from the end of the dairy quotas, what's your assessment on the current impact which milk coming north from from farmers in the Republic of Ireland is having and will have on our local dairy industry in terms of volume and also capacity for our processors? And what's your assessment on the impact which the end of quotas will have on our industry and our farmers? Because I'm focused on the Northern Ireland farmers, especially if Bord Bia cannot export their increased capacity.
Okay. I'll maybe start off with that and maybe bring a colleague in, Seamus McAlean, as well on that one. Well, I suppose in terms of the quotas system, in Northern Ireland certainly, UK production under quota, as you're probably aware, and there's no restraints other than market forces on local production. From that point of view, the ending of milk quotas shouldn't have a noticeable impact on the pattern of production in Northern Ireland. As you say, the main impact for Northern Ireland from the ending of milk quotas will come from the planned increases in production in the south, and particularly if the availability of adequate processing capacity becomes a significant issue in the south, because a lot of milk from Northern Ireland is exported to the south for processing. All of that will depend really on what the price is, I suppose, for milk, and the extent to which people will continue to increase their capacity if the price is low, and so on. So to an extent that's a bit unknown. There, mentioned before was the opportunity for Northern Ireland in terms of our export. Most of our milk output is exported. Over 70% of our milk production is exported. So, in terms of the future sustainability for Northern Ireland is going to be very much determined by the ability of the dairy sector here to respond to the changing times and the opportunities that there are for providing the right product mix in line with customer expectations. And
just a wait and see attitude, is that what you're saying?
Well, I think what we have in place here is the Going for Growth and the agri-food strategy for the agri-food industry, and that includes for the dairy industry up to 2020. So there are growth targets identified in that strategy for, it's not wait and see, there are specific targets identified by the board, and the industry themselves have those ambitions to grow. So
ambitions that haven't delivered anything yet. Their targets, their ambitions, those are.
Well, there's a range of things that we're doing longer term to support that, and very much that's a role for DARD to support the industry in realising its ambitions for growth. And I mean, the number of things that we're doing, we're committed, first of all, to the actions that the agreed DARD actions in the executive response to Going for Growth. A key ask for the department by the Agri-Food Strategy Board was to put in place a farm business improvement scheme worth up to £250 million. So that's something that we're committed to doing. We've developed proposals for that farm business improvement scheme, and those have been included in the Rural Development Programme 2014 to 2020 that has gone to the Commission for approval. But those proposals are designed to assist the sector in developing and become more competitive in achieving sustainable growth.
But back to the original question.
Back to your original question
yes.
and the assessment, and maybe ask Seamus if he could come in on that. Joanne.
It's obviously difficult to predict the future. Yes, the ROI has increased production by 10% over the last 2 years, but 2 years previous to that, it fell by 10%. You know, that really reflected the prices at the time.
It's difficult to predict, but you could plan surely. Yes, what we did hear from Mark Allen about the national strategy being built up in the Republic of Ireland. Our dairy farmers are saying nothing, no strategy, no direction, no way forward.
Yeah, I think you know, DARD has reacted to the crisis that the dairy farmers are facing, and we'll keep on monitoring things.
By meeting with the banks.
Exactly, and other activities that are ongoing with working with farmers. And I think we'll continue to monitor this situation, and if things continue or get worse, you know, we'll ramp up our reaction and
so is that plan B, or do you have a plan B?
I think, you know, at the moment, we're really at the early stages of this, and it could, sometimes these cycles are quite short, and other times, unfortunately, they're a lot longer. So, you know, we have to monitor things and
meeting with processors, they say realistically it'll be the autumn, probably September, before there's any change. So, you know, as an economist, what's plan B, or what's the strategy to get the dairy industry survival over this period?
Well, I suppose, you know, it's limited in what you can do very quickly. You know, obviously we can press the EU to take action you know, as and when necessary, and that's something that we can do. I think, you know, if there's any silver lining in what's happening, it's possibly the fact that the lower price will stop our competitors increasing their production, especially as we're coming to the end of quotas. You know, I know farmers won't see.
It's cold comfort for
it's
farmers
very
that are struggling to pay their bills.
But you know, I think that is it's probably helpful. You know, that if we're going to see a redistribution of milk across Europe, you know, there has to be some pain in getting to that. And the key thing is that if milk production does increase in the Republic, it replaces milk production somewhere else in the world and not here. I think the dairy sector here is in quite a good position to come through that, but that won't happen.
Can I ask what links has DARD got with Derry to put pressure on them to help out with the high energy costs and with the process with the producers face? Because we keep hearing about the banks, we keep hearing about cutting costs, becoming more efficient. You know, surely there's something else can be done, or you have a plan that you're dealing with Derry to try and help. Is there anything else out there, or are they just going to be sort of left hanging until the prices?
Yeah, I suppose really it's gone back to, you know, the longer term strategy that we do have in place, which is the in working and supporting the industry in achieving their targets and their growth ambitions. And we are working with DETI and with other departments in delivering on the response to going for growth. So that is a commitment that's been made right across the executive, and we do have ongoing contact with DETI and so on. So I think it's very important, as well as the sort of, you're asking about the immediate
officials from both departments have met and continue to in this issue then about energy costs and to help, to see if they can help.
Yes,
is that what you're saying, Claire?
We're working as with DETI, Invest and I, with the strategy board as part of the Agri-Food Strategy Boards.
Just there's no mention of it in your briefing.
Yeah.
Of the influence with DETI, and there's absolutely nothing in it.
What we're doing is working with DETI and Invest and I along the Agri-Food Strategy Board on the dairy subgroup, which is the subgroup of the Agri-Food Strategy Board that specifically considers the dairy issues and the challenges for the dairy industry. So that's ongoing.
How successful has that been so far then?
Well, that's ongoing work, and that's to help deliver on the longer term strategy. And what we're doing as well is trying to deal with sort of these these immediate sort of issues and difficulties that arise by looking what more can we do, and we're doing that by seeking to influence at EU level, and in seeking to lobby the Commission if we can, if there's something appropriate can be done there, and in providing the advice and issuing advice to farmers and so on. So it's an ongoing piece of work, and and that's something that we're monitoring very closely. And we'll continue to look at what more, if anything, we can do, because that's a commitment we've made that we'll do what we can to
If anything?
with the industry. Sorry.
What more, if anything, you can do?
What more, if anything, we can do over and above what we're doing? Yes, absolutely.
Goodness, cold comfort for the dairy industry. Thanks, Chair.
Juborn.
Yes, Chairman, I worked on the presentation, and I suppose, like most people that's associated with the farming community at the moment, the question is there any immediate or medium-term strategy that could be pursued to improve the profitability of the dairy sector? Obviously, the liquid milk market very restricted here, given that we have only 1.7 billion consumers. So we're greatly reliant on the dairy commodity markets. Now, given that you're the government department, and given that we're the primary producers, the farmers, and then we have the processors, what can be done between the department and the processing sector to get a more value-added product with a longer shelf life that can be marketed for on the international markets where there is a demand for such products?
Well, just go back again, and we're committed to working with industry to sort of seek to develop industry to meet the challenges. So, that coming into that is the sort of range of products and so on. So what DARD can do is work with industry to help support the development of stronger supply chain. We can work to provide education, training, research to support innovation and development in the industry, and we're working to put in place proposals under the rural measures under the Rural Development Programme to support industry in seeking to develop their own businesses and enterprises, and that's whether it's at farmer level, the Farm Business Improvement Scheme, but it's also through the Agri-Food Processing Investment Scheme. That's one of the proposed measures in the new Rural Development Programme. There's also a range of measures that assist with the development of cooperation within the supply chain in the Rural Development Programme. So there are things that we're seeking to develop and make available support to industry over the coming times. So it will be, it's a long-term commitment.
Chairman, that begs the question, can DARD really have any influence on helping to initiate initiatives or policies that could improve the international marketing of our product? Given that you're the public sector, and given that farming is largely a private sector enterprise, and the processors are also in the private sector, is there much we can do, or is it just about having nice cosy meetings and looking for the banks to sort of go leading in the short term?
Well, I suppose, if you're talking about the international market and opportunities there, one of the key roles that we have in that is in facilitating exporters and gaining access to new markets, and that's through our veterinary service, because in order to gain access to new markets, one of the sort of key underpinning sort of bits of sort of making your case to another market is your animal health and your traceability and your high animal health status and so on. And that's something that our veterinary service are actively involved in. They're working with dairy exporters, dairy export companies. They're working with Invest in I. They're working with DEFRA-led group at a UK level, and also in the All Ireland working group. They've accompanied ministers and accompanied sort of DEFRA-led missions to other countries to seek to secure access for Northern Ireland. We have, just in recent times, the Northern Ireland has opened an office in Beijing, and again, that's representation, permanent representation from Northern Ireland that can assist in securing markets for Northern Ireland companies in export to China. So there is stuff we can continue to do, and we are doing.
But Chairman, if I just could to pursue this a little bit further, given that we're a regional administration under the umbrella of DEFRA, do we have flexibility or freedom via DARD to go directly to China or not?
Well, we're working within the systems that are available to us. So we have on occasion accompanied DEFRA-led missions, but given that we have a representation now in Beijing, what that means is that the DEFRA contingent who would visit China, they our representatives in Beijing are involved in those missions and are meeting with the Chinese as part of that. So yes, you're right, absolutely, that we aren't leading on international trade matters, but we're working through the system, whatever way we can in that system to maximise the impact we can have in Northern Ireland. So we're working very closely with the DEFRA teams who are planning those visits and so on, and ensuring that Northern Ireland is included as an important part of the negotiations and so on that they're having out there.
But lastly, given that we're so dependent on getting 85% of smoke production out of the region, and given that the GB itself is largely not self-sufficient in milk, then we're more dependent on an external market beyond these islands than he is. So are we being handicapped by having to go through the DEFRA umbrella?
Well, it's something we'll continue. We'll have to do it because internationally, that's where international trade's led by DEFRA. It's a reserved matter. It's not a matter that was in our hands. But I think we've been well represented in missions that have gone from DEFRA in recent times. There are also opportunities in the GB market for export to Northern Ireland. So, just to add to that, it's export to EU, to third country, but also within GB, there are opportunities for us.
Thanks, John.
Okay. Tom, Ken.
Just to touch on the last point, and it has been fairly well teased out, but you've said in the last couple of folk that you've answered there about the work is ongoing with other agencies, other departments, working group set up and so forth. But what tangible thing has been done to identify new markets? What new markets have been identified for the dairy industry here? For let's remember, it's coming into a stage where it's going to be getting into dire straits. And something really needs to be done to try and identify and to have new markets there. What has been done, what is being done, and what new markets already have been identified, if you like?
Yeah, well, I think there's a programme of work, as we've talked about, where we're working with DEFRA. We're working as part of the All Ireland working group to identify potential for accessing third country markets from an all-island basis. So we're coming in from different angles, UK, from all-island, and so on. We're doing that. We're working with industry. Industry are actually represented on the UK working group that is dealing with export markets. So it's a DEFRA-led group, but it includes industry, including representatives from our industry here, as well as DARD. So that's an active working group to identify which markets are there we could target and so on. It's something that the Agri-Food Strategy Board as well have seen as a priority, is in terms of actually strengthening and building on the work that's done currently from Northern Ireland, both industry and and government facilitating that. And that's one of the reasons why in Going for Growth, one of the key asks in there was for review of marketing body, or marketing bodies that are in place, with the view to putting in place a sort of a strong marketing body for Northern Ireland in future. So there's a review underway. It is a review led by DETI, but we wait the outcome of that, and indeed, and see how that might impact on future plans as well.
Yeah, but we're working on it, but nothing tangible has come out of it yet, where there really seems to be nothing identified to say to the dairy industry, like, there's a market there that you can get into, or there's a market there that you can get into. And I think that's the road that needs to be looked at, to make sure that something tangible is there, to say to the dairy industry, well, there's a market and you can get into that market there. And it appears that nothing has been substantially identified as yet.
I don't think that's the case, because it's very much, first of all, industry need to want to export, and need, and people are doing that, so it's already happening. You've already got exporters who know they want to export, know where they want to go to export to, and they're seeking to work in partnership with the government to help them do that. That's happening. And so there are markets opening up. That creates some market for others then to join, to sort of join that. We need to know where we want to target our products. So that's, again, for industry to determine, is that the right sort of market for me to go to? Do I want to get into that? Because when you start to focus your efforts on seeking access to an export market, a new market, it's a very long term, it's a very detailed, long process. It takes years of building trust and so on. So it's not something that can be done overnight. So I think in terms of planning for the future, that's something to work very closely with industry on. Yeah. So I think that the sorts of structures you're talking about are there, and there's scope to build further on those.
Well, Chair, just to finish, if all this work has been done that you're talking about, then we can say today that the dairy industry should have no fears or no concerns.
There's opportunities and challenges, definitely, absolutely, and there's going to, maybe Seamus.
Well, I was just going to say that, we do send product to quite a number of African countries, Algeria, and we have sent product to China and Indonesia and places like that. And quite a lot of these countries are now opening up, and that's partly through, processors identifying which countries they want to send to, government helping to sort out the export certification, etc., etc. So all that work can be done, but a market can suddenly disappear if the exchange rate changes, and your currency, there's an unfavourable movement exchange rate, then your product's no longer competitive in that country, and it's just down to an exchange rate which is we have no power over. Nobody has any power over exchange rates. So, you can do all the preparation work, everything's prepared, exchange rate can go against you, and you're not seeing the benefits of that work. But as long as the work's done and the exchange rate does eventually move in your favour, then that market can open up again.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Edwin. Which?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm listening very closely here, and I've heard about lobbying and influence, but what tangible has been done to mitigate against the crisis that the dairy sector is about to enter? It is our second largest sector of the largest business sector in Northern Ireland, which is the agriculture sector. And I want to know what has been done and what you're proposing to do, as opposed to just being influencers and lobbyists.
Mm-hmm. I suppose it's sort of, well, what has been done, and we've, to date, we're talking about what longer term, how we're working to sort of help mitigate. Now this has helped gearing the industry up to become more competitive and sustainable. So we talked about the Rural Development Programme and the proposals that we've developed in there. So we have developed that. We've worked with the industry to develop those proposals, and they're with the Commission currently.
You're using money that would have went to the farmers in the first instance to do that?
No.
The modulation money is really stripped away from the single farm payment to pay for that
No,
programme?
we didn't transfer monies from Pillar 1 from farm payment.
Is that something that you'd consider doing, for example, reducing the amount of modulation money that's taken away from single farm payments, so that the people who are suffering here would end up with more money?
Well, we haven't actually, for CAP reform, new CAP reform, we've got Pillar 1 and Pillar 2. The decision has been made now not to transfer money from Pillar 1 to Pillar 2 for the new programme. Now, that's not, there will be a decision point again in the future whether or not it's appropriate to do that, and that'll be a decision to be taken. But the decision was made not to transfer monies from Pillar 1 to Pillar 2. So for Pillar 2, to support Pillar 2 in the Rural Development Programme, we've had to find additional monies from the Executive. So we have EU funding towards that. We can match fund that. But actually to put in place a significant programme of assistance for the sector, what we have, the case was made to the Executive decided to support that to, in principle, to provide up to £250 million funding to support a farm business improvement scheme in the Rural Development Programme. So while, you know, that's something that we've developed proposals, we will make those bids, and subject to industry demand, we'll make the bids for that money. But that's going to be significant support for the industry in terms of helping the industry become more sustainable and develop. And
That's all very long term.
well, that's a
We
programme up to
have a
20.
short-term issue and a short-term problem.
Yes, it is longer term, absolutely, it is longer term. And while we'll be able to start, if we get agreement from the Commission, we have our business case approval, we get the funding in place, we'll be able to start those measures. So there will be some work starting under that over the next while. In terms of the CAP reform, Pillar 1, in terms of the single farm payment, there's the sort of decisions were made to introduce that payment over, or changes over a 7-year transitional period. That's again to allow farmers to adjust and prepare for those changes. So again, looking longer term, but seeking to assist overall.
But over the last 2 years, voluntary modulation hasn't been applied, so no money has been moved from Pillar 1 to Pillar 2 the last 2 years, except for compulsory modulation, which we have no control over.
And the comment was made in the in the previous work that was done by RAISE around the New Zealand dairy sector, that one of the reasons that it is more efficient is that it is less regulated. Now, we appear in Northern Ireland to take European regulations and seek to gold plate them and apply them as stringently as it is possible to apply them. Is there any notion in the department that they will have a more lax attitude to regulations and therefore reduce the costs that is being applied to the farming sector?
I suppose it'll depend what, you know, regulations, if they're EU regulations, what we'll have to do is comply with the EU regulation. But as you say, you know, or would we seek to gold plate or whatever? So I suppose, you know, it's very general, but it's something we'll always be looking at anytime we make introduce new legislation.
I don't think we would agree that we do gold plate, but the thing about regulation is if we don't apply them, then there's penalties for not doing so.
Well, we've experienced that.
Yeah. So our hands are tied, you know, when it comes to the regulation.
I think if I could come in there on that point, though, in terms of regulations, we talked earlier on about the export markets. One of the things that the export markets expect is enforcement of regulations, and it may be even something that they will want as well. So if you ease back in regulations, you could actually shoot yourself in the foot in terms of going after a market.
Yeah, I've heard that quite often. Yeah. Interestingly enough, New Zealand accounts for, I think, for 34% of the imports from China. And there's considerably less regulation than us. So that doesn't really stack up in reality. You know, I mean, that's an argument to be made, but can you bear that out in facts? Because there's a fact that I've given you. Yeah. New Zealand is the biggest exporter of milk to China. We went into that market, or are in that market. And you're saying that, you know, the more regulations we'll have, the better chance we'll have of getting into the market. That's rubbish. With respect, that is rubbish. We will get into that market on the basis of having competitive milk prices.
But I think it being part of the EU, we must obey the regulation that's imposed on us by being in the EU. Also, by being in the EU, we get single farm payment. We get the protection of import tariffs that other countries have to pay in order to, so they can't flood our market with imports. So we get some benefits from having to meet all that regulation.
Nobody disputes that, but there is a widespread view in the agricultural sector that when it comes to regulation, that it is more stringently applied in Northern Ireland than most other parts of the European Union.
I don't know if that
I'm
And
not
it may
sure.
well be that New Zealand farmers have the exact same view, that they feel their regulations, you know, I don't know exactly what the regulation is in New Zealand or the level of regulation. I suspect their farmers complain as much about it as ours do.
Okay, okay, everyone. Ian?
Thanks, Chair, and sorry for missing the up until now, but on the basis of what Mark was saying previously when I was here, you know, there was a pretty bleak picture painted, you know, as to the southern market, if you like, you know, and I would imagine there that up here, you know, mirrors what might happen in the south. But the question I'm saying to you is there, you know, that if we're talking about markets, you know, in Europe, surely with the Russian ban, right, and the Chinese there have been becoming more self-sufficient. Well, you know, European countries are in the same boat as ourselves. They're fighting, you know, for the other markets too, you know. So while we have to say to ourselves and say it out there, you know, that we have to be optimistic and put a positive note on all of that, but we need to be asking ourselves, what advice are we giving to farmers, dairy farmers here in the north, you know, as regards increasing their yield and their product? Are we doing that? You know, are we having a sensible conversation as to the state of play, the reality of the state of play here, rather than leaving everybody up to their own devices? If you get where I'm coming from.
Yeah, yeah. I think in terms, I mean, there's what we're doing sort of at the department level and what we're doing in terms of dairy advisors.
Yeah. I think the starting point in that is that our support and advice to dairy farmers is to produce milk as competitively as possible and at as low a price as possible, and the support that the advisors would give them in the training and the new technologies that they would help them adopt is all aimed at doing that. So that's your starting point. If you're able to produce milk at as low a price as possible, excuse me, then after that it's up to the individual to talk to their processor to identify whether or not, you know, that processor has the prospects of taking more milk, and if they have, then to follow that through and produce it, knowing that they have a cost base that they could live with if the price falls back. That would be the sort of thinking that would have to go on with a farmer. But in terms of advising farmers to increase milk production, that's an individual business decision that people would have to take based on their view of the prospects for the future.
Yeah, I listened to the news this morning, and I think he's the chief executive of the UK Farmers Union. I can't remember the exact name. And he was a very short time ago. He was advising farmers to increase production. You know, so what I'm saying is there, you know, we have to, you know, let the people know the state of play here, and we shouldn't be coming out and stuff, you know, like that. Would you not say?
Yeah, it is very much down to individual business and the business plan they have for their own enterprise and so on, the business, and sort of taking account and taking advice on that. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, Tom.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for the presentation. A couple of questions. Just, is there any indication why China has reduced their purchase of milk products so much?
Yeah.
I'm not sure, to be fair, but I suspect it's exchange rate related partly, and also the fact that they are trying to increase their own self-sufficiency in various products. But it's more than likely it's exchange rate is a factor.
Yeah, the speculation was they'd come back into the market again sometime in the spring.
Okay. But there's no, I thought maybe there'd have been more evidence around that, you know, not only for Northern Ireland but for other countries as well. I'm sure there's, you know, quite a bit of export going on from other areas into China, so I thought we made it a better idea of why that was. But
well, there will be people who know that answer to that. I just, unfortunately, we don't.
Okay. Do you actually believe that we're better at times like this, whenever the milk price is reducing? Do you believe that farmers are better actually reducing their milk production, having a lesser production, so that, you know, the market's smaller here? Or are you better actually trying to sustain your production or even increase it, because it means that the processors are more efficient, maybe because they're getting more milk. As the Department of Agriculture who advise farmers, have you any advice on that?
Yeah, that was discussed quite at length at a seminar just before the winter fair back in December, and there was two opposing schools of thought along the lines you've just outlined, and what it boiled down to was every individual farmer would have to make a decision based on their cost, their cost of production and their own circumstances. You could argue that that to maintain production covers the overheads, even though you may be losing money on every litre. The income from those litres still covers your overhead, which is going to be there regardless. The other view was if you cut back in production, it might be hard to ramp it up again whenever things turn around. Cows go off. You know, if you're just feeding to cut costs, depress yields in the short term, it might be hard to switch that back on again. So
what conclusion did the department come to?
Well, the department didn't come to any conclusion. It's in terms of general advice. That's the point I'm trying to make, that there isn't a fix for everybody in the same story. Everybody would have to look at their own circumstances, and the advisor would advise accordingly in that set of circumstances for that farmer.
Severe cupboard?
No, it's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do. You can't give general advice if it doesn't apply to people. You have to be specific to the person who has the problem. That's the right thing to do.
Chair, in the letter that the department sent to yourself, there's one line in it that says that I'm disappointed that at the council debate Commissioner Hogan rejected calls for additional crisis management measures at this time. What were those additional crisis management measures that were being asked for?
Well, it was really to do with the well, generally to look specifically at what the Commission have already done, and to look at what more they could do. I mean, measures introduced by the Commission were private storage aid for skim milk and powder. Intervention period for 2014 for skim milk and powder and butter has been extended from 30 September to 31st of December 2014. Intervention period brought forward for 2015 from 1st of March.
Yeah, but that has already been, that's agreed.
There's a range of things already.
But the inference in this letter, a statement in this letter saying that Commissioner Hogan rejected calls for additional crisis management measures. So what I'm asking is, what were those management measures that were rejected, that was asked for?
Yeah, well, there's a range of things that the EU could do if needed. And that includes cap compensation using the EU crisis reserve, intervention, export refunds, accelerating trade negotiations. So there's a range of other tools there.
What were they asked for?
What the Commissioner was asked was to look at what further tools it would be the right time to use at this point. And he has said, no, they're not prepared to look at it at this stage. One of the things might have been looking at the sort of whether the sort of there's an effective safety net currently with the price 17 pence per litre being the sort of floor price, whether that's that should be looked at. But Commissioner has ruled out doing anything at this point. So there are still a range of things there that could be done. But I mean, in terms of when's the right time to do that, the Commission need to think about when that might be. There will be implications for the EU budget of doing these things, and there are implications from the other tools as well. So there's no sort of, I suppose, no sort of silver bullet for this, really, is it?
The Minister has indicated that she'll seek an early meeting. Has that
yes.
been?
Yes, she's hoping to have that shortly. Yes, to have that in the new year.
No date yet.
I don't think there's a date for that as yet.
Okay. Right, thank you.
Okay, Sidney Anderson.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for your presentation. We've talked today about export markets, and we've touched on the home markets and the present crisis that the dairy sector and industry can find itself, or is finding itself. And we talk about the pending major expansion in the Republic of Ireland, and in the past where a lot of the milk here could have been sent over to GB, but now that's slowing down and picking up on what's taking place. So I know we talk about the export market, but how do we establish or re-establish our home market? We're talking about to try and maintain or increase in it. And I know it has been touched on here, but well, what's the department's view on that? What are we doing to try and have a hold on what's going on here and try to, depending on what's possibly down the line in the future for us?
I think...
Like, how do you increase production here and send it, say, down south? If they're expanding.
Yes.
I'm just trying to get my figures around my head here. If you want to expand here, and the Republic are expanding, and you want to get a market there, and vice versa, across the water, to send your market. I'm talking about the home markets here, first of all. How do we establish, maintain, or improve on that?
I suppose in the south, whether or not, I mean, and it's the unknown really, but will there still be sufficient market for exports to the south? You know, if they increase, that depends on where they increase, and you know, even geographically, whether they're.
And the signs are they're going to increase. Is that right, Colette? And that they're going to go into an expansion mode.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
So can you see that if that happens, Colette, is the market then more or less go closed down for any expansion in Northern Ireland?
Well, no. I mean, there's the market
in,
there's market in the south, export market in the south.
Right.
Question over whether, you know, there continue to be a market in the south. That'll depend if they've got processing capacity. That'll depend geographically where their production is increasing, because, you know, for example, if their production increases, we think it's likely to take place in the southwest of Ireland, you know, producers in border counties may still find it, or processors in border counties may still find it attractive to continue to import milk from Northern Ireland. So, you know, it's not an absolute certain that there'll be no further demand from the south. So it'll be a matter of sort of seeing what opportunities there are there. Then the market in Northern Ireland, you're talking about it. I think the reason we're exporting is because we're producing more than we can need to use here. But yes, there may be sort of through other diversification to other products and so on, there may be further opportunities here. Then there's the export markets, and we talked about, you know, the GB to EU to third countries. So there is potential in other markets as well. But I don't think any of this is sort of an absolute definite or done, and I think it's the predicting that. I don't know whether.
Well, I would just say that I suppose the high prices recently have encouraged everybody around the world to increase their production, including GB, which they had been way, way below the quota for a number of years there. And recently they've started to up their milk production. That's possibly why we're sending slightly less to GB at the moment. So high price will encourage everybody to increase production. But the inevitable result of that is there's too much milk and price falls again. I think we've shown ourselves to be quite competitive. We've come through quite a number of previous crises. Also, you know, over the last 15 years, we have bought a lot of quota from GB and brought it over here. And I think, you know, that's a reflection that, you know, we're reasonably competitive. We were able to do that and up our production while they were reducing theirs. You know, so these technical movements in markets come and go, and it's about how good you are at riding the storm and coming out the other side to some extent. I think we've done.
Are you confident? And I know it's probably difficult to know in this situation, but that we here in Northern Ireland are as well placed as anyone to ride this storm and to look to the future with optimism. And or is there something we are not doing we should be doing to keep up and improve and I say the markets that we're looking for?
I think we are in a good position in terms of dairy. I think there are opportunities. I think there is probably scope to always do better and seek to find what ways of becoming more efficient or developing supply chains or export markets and so on. So there's definitely opportunities there. Now there are all the issues, of course.
I think what we continually have to do is ensure that we're efficient. That's the key message, because everybody else is going to be efficient, and you could be competing against somebody who has a lower cost base than you. So where you can compensate is to have a higher quality or a better product or something unique that people are prepared to pay more for. But you've got to be competitive on your production costs, and I think that's the focus. And I think we have a wide spectrum of if you like, level of efficiency. We have some farmers who are very efficient and some who are inefficient, and it's a matter of trying to encourage as many of those as possible to become more efficient and to look at the costs and to take on board actions and advice that will help them to cut their costs.
Another point just on closing about trade negotiations. I think, Member Carlyle, you did touch on it in your opening remarks. This comprehensive trade and economic agreement. Could you explain the volumes involved are not likely to have a significant impact on markets? Why is that, or what is this so small, or what's the issues there?
Well, Seamus will.
Suppose, the volumes involved compared to the EU market as a whole are going to be,
EU market.
are going to be quite small. So therefore, we don't expect the European price to be hugely affected by the trade between EU and Canada.
So you don't see that as an opportunity for
There's an
market coming from Northern Ireland, say?
There is an opportunity
Not
for dairy processors as a result. I think possibly overall EU dairy processing might gain as a result of the CETA agreement. But it's not going to give everybody extra higher prices. Maybe we'll just see a slight expansion and prices might change very slightly. It's not going to be a huge factor in the market.
And was not intended to be that. It was not. What was the intention at the outset to get this export market in, say, into Canada and Wales?
Well, I think the intention was just to give everybody more opportunity. We have more opportunity to sell our milk, and they have more opportunity to sell other products to us. But often you find that prices don't change that much. I mean, at the end of the day, there's only so much demand for milk, and who produces that milk may change from time to time. But at the end of the day, over time, that price varies up and down, but it stays within a certain range, and that just reflects the fact that there's only a certain amount of demand. Whoever's the most competitive provides.
It's a market,
But at the end of the day, they're not going to end up with higher prices. They're just going to end up with the same price as usual. They're just going to have more of the market. And, as long as they're able to produce the milk profitably, then they have a margin and they're able to survive.
Okay, thank you for that, Tom. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, sir. I've seen some media reports of one of the big English dairy processors in some sort of financial difficulty. Are you aware of that or situation? Mainland?
First Milk.
First Milk, the cooperative, yeah. Yes, for that yesterday.
Yeah, and have you've been in, we have a number, in Northern Ireland we have a small number of processors, so you have been in discussions with those two, have you? At any stage? Or contact?
With that particular processor, no, I don't think there are Northern Ireland producers involved and provide their milk to that cooperative.
Okay.
Understand?
No, I think the difficulty for milk production right across Europe is you have, I suppose, a double whammy. You have the Russian import ban, which on the face of it didn't seem to be serious, but those countries that are exporting to Europe, they had to find a market in mainland Europe. They're exporting to Russia, had to find a market in Europe. So that, of course, any extra production going into the market, plus we had brilliant weather last year or 18 months, which increased production probably right across Europe. So it has been difficult. Is there any one thing as a policy branch that you can see that could be done to help stabilise the situation? Is there anything? If there was, I'm sure you'd have ready. It's a very difficult situation that we're going to find ourselves in, I think, the next number of months. So.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think the longer term, sort of working with industry on the longer term is the important thing to do, and continuing to do that to help industry in developing and growing and finding those export markets and so on, and what we can do to facilitate that. So that's a longer term. Short, looking to sort of see if there's any at EU level can be done, and providing the advice and so on. It is very difficult, you know, a lot of it out of our control, but where we can, you know, work with the industry.
Yeah, I think the recent report has seen where milk production in Northern Ireland has been 7.5% up on the previous month last year, October, I think. So that proves how good the year it has been for production, and that, you know, doesn't also doesn't help. Can I thank you very much again for your presentation and for your questions. Thank you. Refer members to agenda item 8, the correspondence. Can refer members to the correspondence received at pages 107 to 190. The revised index sheet has been tabled. Can refer members to the item on the NI inshore fisheries strategy. In particular, are members content with the written information received, or would members prefer an oral briefing on that? Members content with the written briefing? They are okay. Yeah. Members content to action the rest of the correspondence is suggested on the index sheet at page 105, 106.
Content.
Yeah. Agenda item 9, forward work programme. Can refer members to the forward work programme at pages 192 to 197. Can I remind members that prior to the Christmas recess, the committee agreed to meet with its counterpart committee from the Republic of Ireland. Can I advise members that the Agriculture, Food and Marine committee from the House from the Dáil will meet with the committee on Tuesday the 27th of January 2015. This will be a meeting over lunch time before the regular committee meeting that day. Can I ask that all members put that in their diaries and make an effort to attend? Tuesday the 27th of January 2015. Yep.
Here.
Okay.
12 o'clock. I'll send out an email.
12 o'clock.
Okay. Can I advise members that the department has deferred 3 pre-consultations? Proposed changes to brucellosis eradication programme deferred until the 17th of February. Proposed amendment to TB examination and testing deferred until the 17th of February. Pre-consultation on proposals for investment in the NI fishing and agriculture sectors deferred until later in the session. Can I seek agreement for the forward work programme?
Yes, great.
Item agenda 10.
Chair, sorry, could I go back just very briefly to the correspondence? One item there regarding the loss of single farm payment because of the land being planted. I think I seen some announcement in some of the farming papers over Christmas that issue was being addressed, was it?
You mean the single farm payment on tree planting land?
Yeah. On land, yeah. Land.
Can we get someone to check that out?
I know we'll get a response probably to that letter anyway. That we decided to action.
When is that? Just for.
Sorry, it's 8.5. The correspondence.
Okay. Yep. Okay. Great. That's fine.
Okay. Agenda item 10, is there any other business? I'm aware, I'm sure you're afraid, that the Irish Republic has gained access to the US market for beef. Should we write a letter to our own minister asking that this be followed up? I'm speaking to a meat processor just today, rang me, and he feels that there is a very good market there if we could get into it for prime cuts. That's his view. So I was speaking a few hours ago just, and so I think everyone happy right to the minute to the minister on that issue. Okay. Agenda item 11, date and time of next meeting. The next meeting of the Committee of Agriculture. I will close session. Everyone is after the thing. Date and time of next meeting. The next meeting of the Committee of Agriculture and Rural Development will take place on Tuesday the 20th of January 2015 at 1:30 p.m. in room 30 Parliament Buildings. Meeting's adjourned and we go into closed session.
Committee room 30. This is the Northern